One of the most important things that modern atheists can learn from Hume is the limitations of sense perception and reason. That's
Oh, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it?
just something that they haven't taken seriously.
Let me go ahead and stop you here. No, we're not going to take it seriously. The limitations of sense perception, no doubt. It's true that we have no valid metric with which to prove that our senses are an accurate depiction of reality.
Okay, hold it. I'm going to have to interrupt the interrupter. First, MitchStokes said atheists could learn something from the philosopher DavidHume about the limitations of sense perception. Then you said it's true that we have no valid metric with which to prove that our senses are an accurate depiction of reality. So you do in fact agree with him. There are limitations. Okay, good. But your position that we have no valid way evidencing the accuracy of our perception, it's an extreme view. The words no valid way is an absolute. In fact, I can think of two distinct ways that our senses work to give an overwhelmingly positive view that they are reliable. Number one, they work in a similar way that cross-references do on a map. When we use cross-references, we get an accurate position. Let me explain. Suppose I have an object in front of me. The stereoscopic effect of having two eyes helps me accurately gauge the distance and its real shape. It's the same with ears. With two ears, the sound arrives in each ear at a slightly different time if the sound originates from any angle off to one side. There's two cross-referencing systems right there. A second cross-referencing system is where I might use my fingers to feel the object. Its shape accurately corresponds to what my eyes have been telling me. In another example, I might perceive with my eyes that I'm in a large chamber, like a cathedral or an atrium. My ears will also confirm this as I hear the ambience of the large empty but walled space. I might be on the sea in a ship with a large atrium, in which case my sense of balance will correspond with the way the horizon moves and gives me a cross-referencing effect to the sense that I'm being carried along on a large moving object on the sea. Also, my sense of smell confirms the reality of being at sea. So I think, there's very good reason to find that our senses are indeed accurate responders and give us an accurate view of reality in the main. We also know that, and this is number two, we also know that for the most part, all things being equal, our experience teaches us that our senses are working reliably. That's historically. If our senses were unreliable, then when danger was apparent, we wouldn't be adept at escaping it. We would have perished before now if this had not been true. So the human history of survival as a species, through flood, fire, famine, disease, war, earthquake, ice ages, all of these conspire to give us evidence of the effectiveness of our senses to give accurate perception at the level at which they are used in our everyday world. Therefore, our senses are well proven to give us a preponderance of reliable beliefs. That's not to say we can't be fooled or that mistakes can't be made, but for the most part, our survival history proves that our senses are reliable in most cases.
In fact, there is some evidence to suggest that our senses are not. But it doesn't matter. That's all we have to go on, is our sensory perception. We are subjects. We are subjective beings. Our experience is subjective. As subjects, it's impossible for us to ever have an objective way to demonstrate anything. What you're proposing is called a red herring. I would suspect somebody with a PhD in some sort of philosophy to understand that. It's a red herring.
Wait a minute. A red herring? I need to interrupt you again. All he said was that our senses are limited, and you agreed except that you went beyond mere limitation and said there was no valid way to gauge the accuracy of our senses. You took the extreme position, whereas MitchStokes is referring to the work of Hume, who merely proposed a limitation, not an absolute. And now look what you've done. You've made another absolute. And I thought it was a common accusation that Christians were the absolutists. You said, as subjects, it's impossible for us to ever have an objective way to demonstrate anything. But that statement you just made is itself a demonstration of your ability to know something about reality, unless you don't want us to believe you. If we have no objective way to know something about reality, how is it that you just purported to tell us something objectively true about reality? No. You have failed your own statement. Therefore, it self-destructs.
Whether you ask for absolute certainty or objective demonstrations of the validity of sense perception, is still a red herring.
At all. And DavidHume took it very seriously, and saw that, look, there's really no way to rationally justify reason.
Well, what you're asking is, it's nonsense at its core. Let me tell you this, okay? Reason is built from the logical absolutes. A equals A. If A equals A, then A does not equal B. If A equals A and B equals B, there is no middle ground. I can't remember it, and I put them very poorly, but it doesn't matter. That's all reason is. It's the logical absolutes. We have no rational way to actually demonstrate those because they're tautologies. You understand that, right? They're self-demonstrating. A equals A. We can't prove that A equals A because by definition, A equals A. By definition, it can't be proven.
I'm frankly incredulous that you could accuse Stokes of offering red herrings when this is all part of established history and philosophy. You said that we have no rational way to actually demonstrate those. But of course you can. But it does mean that you need to use reason to justify reason. The only thing is that it's a circular argument. You seem to have the gall to expect us to give you credibility when it appears you are not even capable of expressing the fundamental laws of thought, the laws of non-contradiction. It seems you aren't grasping the thrust of Stokes' thought. What he's referring to is that one cannot justify reason without reference to reason. This is known as a circular argument. The laws of non-contradiction are proven reliable by the fact that when they are employed, they sustain logical arguments. And they don't sustain an argument if the law of non-contradiction is violated. If this is what you're trying to say, why don't you just come out and say it? I mean, you're the one claiming to school a PhD in philosophy. The thrust of what Stokes is saying is that on an atheist worldview, they cannot give a cogent reason for the existence of reason. They just accept it and say, oh, well, it's just is, that's all. In a Christian worldview, we have a justification for reason. If God is a reasoning being, then it isn't a happy accident that the laws of logical thought were discovered. But more than that, if he is the source of all reason, then it would make a lot of sense that we, being made in the image of God, are therefore reasoning beings. And hey, that's just how we find ourselves. But not only that, being capable of distinguishing the laws of logic, what we find when we examine the world according to the laws that are part of the nature we are endowed with, is that it too, the universe, has an order in it that we are able to resonate with. That is, it just so happens that the world is at least in part intelligible to us. An atheist just accepts that the laws of logic are just there as self-evident truths, or rather The atheist wants us to believe that it's just a happy accident, or not even explore the origin of these things. If scientists in general accepted that non-committal attitude, that acceptance of, oh well, so what, the presence of the otherwise amazing tenacity of scientists to explore exceedingly difficult problems in nature seems to betray the exceeding lack of interest in those laws that make this exploration possible. It is inquiry with blinkers. The more you think about it, the more striking and conspicuous is its absence. Okay, so we've been talking about the complete acceptance of the laws of logic without any sort of, from the atheist perspective, without any sort of inquiry as to why we have these laws of logic. The atheist particularly just accepts the laws of logic as being there. But they only relate to minds, and yet they're universal, and therefore they exist independently of human minds, or at least their universality points to the transcendence of these laws. But scientists just accept them, particularly atheist scientists, and that remarkable lack of curiosity is notable. Not all scientists, of course, do this or take them on face value without questioning them. For instance, Einstein was noted to have said, "One may say the eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility." That was Albert Einstein. In other words, he thought that the human capacity for reason was a remarkable thing. But not only was our capacity for reason remarkable, but the capacity for the universe to be reasoned with is remarkable. It's comprehensible. It's comprehensibility. Another brilliant scientist, and he's not an atheist, Paul Davis, a brilliant physicist at, I think it's Arizona State University, he says this: "The right scientific attitude," now listen to this, and I'm actually quoting John Lennox here, who is quoting Paul Davis. "The right scientific attitude is essentially theological. Science can only proceed if the scientist adopts an essentially theological worldview. Even the most atheistic scientist accepts as an act of faith the existence of a law-like order in nature that is at least in part comprehensible to us." Einstein said, "I cannot imagine the scientist without that profound faith." Note the word, faith. That was a quote from John Lennox, quoting both Einstein and Paul Davis. And what all that amounts to is that, firstly, it ought to be acknowledged that our capacity for reason is a wonderful thing. We see many other organisms that don't have that same capacity. And not only that, but the universe is also wonderfully fitted to be comprehended. That looks like a jack-up. When a scientist accepts as an act of faith the law-like order in nature, he's not only accepting without thinking a lot about it, he's also accepting without thinking a lot about it their own capacity for logic and reasoning and exploration of our natural universe. Well, that's probably enough for now, but maybe we'll look at the question of morality that Stokes and the atheist is disagreeing with about Stokes. Good night.